listening on Zoom for helping me. I know you guys don't want to see my private notes. They're embarrassing. I wrote down everything. I have everything memorized and I'm reciting it all from memory because I have no brain. I just write and, no, I'm just kidding. A lot of this is spontaneous, which is exactly how your interview should be. You know, it's good to memorize and practice your answers, but you have to also be prepared and understand what the pain points is of your audience so you can speak to them accordingly. All right, so let's get to what I feel is the toughest interview question, which is questions that ask about your career history. These questions are really tough because they are usually the first question that they ask. You know, they'll ask you something like, hey, walk me through your resume, or tell me about yourself. I have some examples here. They'll say things like, tell me about yourself, walk me through your resume. How have you grown as an electrical engineer? How have you grown as a software engineer, for example? What are some of the things that you have learned over your career as a software engineer? These are some of the questions that they might ask. And these questions are really tough because they're in the very beginning of the interview. And the impression you make in these questions, in this answer, it's going to trickle throughout your interview. So if you use this question to really speak to their pain points, then you're going to have a much better interview overall. The questions they ask you are going to help facilitate you, and they're going to help you bring your best strengths out. But if your answer is kind of all over the place and it has some of the weaknesses that I'm about to touch on, then they're going to grill you further. They're going to be like, really? Why do you have a degree in marketing? I mean, well, what did you study? How did you get your background in software engineering? And they're going to grill you and keep digging deep and nitpicking into your every perceived red flag in your career history, right? So here's why they're asking. First and foremost, they want to know, how aligned are you with my job? Do you have what it takes to succeed? And if you have a bad answer, it usually sounds like, let me zoom in a little. It does not focus very much on the target field, for example. So for example, if you are interested in software engineering and you say, oh, you know, I went to UCI, I was the head of the Muslim Student Association, we did a lot of events for, you know, the Arab Pride Week or whatever. That's great, that's wonderful. It shows your ability to organize large events and it shows your ability to galvanize people and enact a change, but it doesn't really focus on your ability to get the job done. So even in that first question where you're telling them about yourself, you're not really telling them about yourself. Nobody really cares about you. They care about their job. They care about getting the job done. So the more you can speak to that, the better you're going to sound, right? Another weakness or another mistake you can make when answering this question is being too personal. Being like, hi, my name is Fatemah, I live in Irvine, I have a daughter, she's 2, she just got sick, I caught this bug from her, that's why I sound like this. Again, nobody cares. Can you come in and do this job well? If you start talking about things like how you've been on leave, how you went on sabbatical, in your free time you like sewing your own dresses, etc., that is very interesting and it does humanize you, but that is not what you want to lead with. That is not a good first impression you want to lead with. In that very first impression, you want to speak directly to their employer needs. So are we seeing kind of a pattern here, right? So you want to speak to their needs and you want to kind of stay on topic. Too long, oh my God, I had this interview with this woman and I simply said, tell me about yourself. And her answer, and I timed it because I was like, okay, I started this interview at 10 a.m. It ended at 10:35 a.m. So it was a 35-minute answer and she told me her entire life history. She talked a lot of trash about her bosses. She talked a lot of trash about her colleagues. And it was like, wow, I totally tuned out. I don't have the capability as a human being to pay attention to something for 35 minutes straight when it has nothing to do with what I'm looking for. And I don't think any of us does. We tune out. Like that's just human nature. So keep your answer to about 5 to 10 sentences. 5 to 10 sentences is about 1 to 2 minutes. And that's about the length of, you know, the attention span that an interviewer will have. And when you give them a chance to engage with you again, like if you say, I noticed in your job description that you guys were interested in hiring somebody that specifically has experience with the Japanese market, it gives them a chance to reset their attention span. They'll say, yes, actually, we're going to be capitalizing on that this year. So it gives them a chance to start paying attention to you again. So you want to make it as conversational as possible, and you don't want to talk at your interviewer, right? Another thing that you don't want to do is draw attention to perceived weaknesses in your candidacy, right? So if, for example, you are looking for a software engineering job, but you studied marketing, you don't want to say, I studied marketing at UCI. You want to say, I got my start in software engineering when I joined a boot camp and I learned about Python and blah, 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 right? You don't want to draw any attention to anything that would undermine your credibility. So in that first answer, in that first impression, you want to focus as tightly as possible on everything that qualifies you for that job. Now, I want to take a quick break here. Has anyone here made the mistakes that I'm talking about in the bad answer characteristics? No? All of us are interview champs? Oh, you have? Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about what you did?
Being too personal.
Being too personal, yeah. That can happen. That can happen, especially when we're excited and nervous. You know, it's really easy to get kind of carried away. But just kind of memorizing your answer or like noting down, okay, these are the 5 points I want to touch on, that's really key. And one of the things that I like to do, because these days the initial interview is almost always on Zoom, what I like to do is I like to go through the job description and I like to note down like 5 points that I have to convey in my interview. Like, I have to tell them how good I am at building teams because this is one of the key pain points that they mentioned, and this is one of my biggest strengths. And if we don't get to that, like I have to redirect the conversation around this skill. So I'll make a list of these 5 points. I'll put it on a little post-it note and I'll stick it right next to my webcam. They're not gonna know I'm looking at a post-it, right? So I'll put it there. And if we don't get to that, if we don't get to one of those skills that I really, really need to convey, I will redirect the interviewer. I will say, I noticed in your job description that building up teams was a really big thing that you want your predecessor to come in and do. Can I speak to that a little bit? Can I talk to you a little bit about how I built up 4 departments from scratch? You know, this allows you to take charge of that interview because it is a two-way street. You're not just reacting to their questions, you have to take charge a little bit as well. And let's face it, sometimes the person on the other side of the table, they're just not good interviewers. Maybe they're really good at their job, maybe they're really stellar engineers or managers or whatever the case is, but interviewing in itself is an art and it's a skill and you need to be practiced in order to do it well. And if they don't have that, take control of that. Especially if you're a more senior professional, you can, because you have that authority that comes with your experience, right? Okay, so basically what they're looking for in your question is, do you have the strengths that are required of this role, and have you had successes in a similar role before? That's all they're looking for. If you want to round out your answer, you can talk a little bit about your personal life. Oh, and by the way, please, if you want like a written version of these slides, or if you want like a PDF version of all of my interview frameworks, just hit that QR code. I'll be sharing this time and time again throughout the presentation. And that takes you to my website. Hit the contact page, and you can download my cheat sheets. I have my salary doubling resume cheat sheet in there. I have my LinkedIn cheat sheet, my interview cheat sheet. I have the only networking template you'll ever know. It's guaranteed to get you a response, and a bunch of other free resources that you can check out. If there's anything that you're specifically looking for that I've mentioned in this lesson, then you can just hit the contact button and reach out to me and I'll help you find it. But yeah, I have a really detailed interview cheat sheet. Actually, I'd like to show it to you now.
Is that symbol on my webpage?
I'm sorry?
That symbol, whatever you call it, is that on your webpage?
Yeah, exactly. Let me pull it up for you guys. So if you go to careertuners.com, almost every web page has this little button. Grab our salary doubling resume cheat sheet, and there's this free resources tab. You can click on that and grab almost all of my free resources by submitting your email. And I'll just pull up my interview cheat sheet right now. This is what it looks like. You should get it in your email. So like basically everything that I'm covering in this PowerPoint, you will have there. Okay, and it's there's 16 pages, so there's like seven questions that I go into in detail that you guys can check out. Okay? So don't worry about taking notes, don't worry about, you know, because interviewing, it takes practice, right? So don't worry about having to write everything down and getting it perfect. I have a bunch of free resources that are gonna help you. Okay. All right, so here's a sample answer. I like to start with the present. So when I'm answering the question, tell me about yourself, I like to say, my name is Fatemah, and my job title is blah, 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 or I'm a student at blah, blah, blah. So my name is Fatemah, and I'm a sales director at Widget Inc., and currently I oversee a $20 billion territory. So immediately you're leading with authority, you're saying this is something that's relevant to your job, assuming that they're interviewing for like a sales director role, or like a chief sales officer role. And then what you do is you talk about the past. So you start with the present, you go into the past, and you say something like, I got my start in the medical device field as a salesperson and was quickly promoted based on my leadership initiatives in Widgets Inc. And since becoming a director, I've helped expand our territory by $5 billion. So while talking about the past, talk about how you got your start in the space and drop a quick accomplishment if you can. If you're a really young professional, like some of the members of our audience here, and you don't have like a past experience to draw on, it's not there. Here we go. You can say, I became interested in this field when I did a project, when I did like, let's say a Python automation project in my class, and I quickly fell in love with it, and I built this, and I presented my research at blah, 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 and I realized that this is something I want to do for the rest of my life. Right, so that's how you talk about the past. And then you want to talk about the future. You can say something like, I'm driven to continuing my success in the medical device field, and I hope that I can channel my strengths in sales strategy development, blah, 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 as an aggressive chief sales officer. So I'm hoping that I can contribute to a company that's looking for somebody who's skilled at developing really powerful automation tools, that needs a really strong events manager, blah, blah, blah. So whatever you saw in the job description, echo it back to them. Immediately, their ears are going to perk up and they're going to think, this is a serious candidate. I'm going to ask follow-up questions that are going to draw more out of this person so that it supports their candidacy. Versus if you are making some of the mistakes that I touched on earlier, like you're talking too much about your personal life, you're drawing attention to perceived red flags in your candidacy, they're going to dig into that. They're going to say, well, I'm curious why you're interested in this field when you have no experience at all. Do you really think that having just a certification is enough for your training? They're not going to ask you that rudely, but it's going to be just that incisive, right? And lastly, in this framework, I like to add just one small thing to kind of humanize, just one sentence, like when I'm not working, I'm part of 3 book clubs. I really enjoy reading, especially books on leadership. Because that humanizes you. It allows you to become memorable. It allows them to remember you. Oh yeah, that was the book girl. She read a lot of books. So just one sentence about your personal life, and that's it. And that's optional. You can go ahead and totally skip that if you want. Okay, if you want to be really creepy, what you can do is you can stalk your interviewer on social media, and you can find out what their interests are, and be like, when I'm not working, I do exactly what you do. So if you see they're snowboarding, you can say, when I'm not working, I really like snowboarding. And then they'll be like, wow, what a likable person, because likability actually matters a lot in the hiring process, right? That human connection. They're gonna be like, okay, we have a common interest. Likability is really critical for hiring decisions, actually. All right, so let's talk about this question that we got. Questions that assess your weaknesses. What critical feedback do you most often receive? What is your greatest weakness? So does anyone want to kind of share what they typically do for this question? None of us are brave enough? No? Okay, we'll talk about why they're asking and all of that. So first of all, they're asking because they want to see that you're self-aware and you're always willing to improve. Because getting feedback is a part of any job. Running into failures, running into setbacks and challenges is a part of any job. It doesn't matter how high you are in the corporate ladder, it doesn't matter how low you are. Failures, obstacles, and feedback, they want to see that you can deal with those well. A bad answer would be something that overshares, like, oh, and this is really bad and illegal, but sometimes people will share that I have a weakness because I have this handicap or I have this health issue and it sometimes hinders my ability to do the job. It's illegal for any employer to discriminate against you based on a health reason, but they're gonna find some other reason to discriminate against you. They're gonna be like, oh, well, we just didn't think that you had the right cultural fit, or we found somebody that's more qualified than you, right? So don't overshare your personal weaknesses. Don't talk too much about your health issues, because especially on the other side of the table, they're trying to manage risks. They're trying to go with the person that's least risky, right? You also don't want to just show an answer that doesn't show how you're working towards fixing that issue, right? So let's say your weakness is you talk too much in meetings, and that's it. You don't make any, indication about how you're working to fix it. That's a bad answer. If you start blaming people, I had this interview with this candidate for a sales role, and I was like, yeah, tell me about your last job. And she was like, you know what, I never really was like the top ranking sales professional there because my boss, I think she was kind of racist against Asian people. And I don't think she really liked my, blah, blah, blah. And she was just going on and on. I'm like, Bro, you didn't get top ranking sales professional, but you got second. That's still a really big accomplishment. And for you to have so much defensiveness about this, that you're gonna start talking trash about your boss, that's not a good look, because me on the other side of the table, I'm gonna relate more to your boss than to you, right? Because I am in that same position. So you definitely don't wanna pass the blame onto others when you're talking about your weakness. I don't have a weakness, I'm perfect, I set the bar too high. That's not a valid answer either, please don't do that. And lastly, I don't have a skill that's critical for this job. So let's say you're interviewing for like a software development role, and then you say that your weakness is you don't know programming. Oops, you're not going to get hired. You know what I mean? So don't mention a skill that's critical for the job. And what they're looking for is, are you sharing a real issue? Do you have self-awareness, and are you willing to improve? Again, you can grab all of these on my website. So here's an answer that I like to use. So start with the weakness. When I first started working, I had a bad habit of interrupting people in meetings because I was really enthusiastic and I wanted to share what I felt. It wasn't until later that I realized that this attitude was turning many people off. I have since recognized that if everyone participates, it's better for our business. I now count to 3 before saying anything in a meeting, right? So you have the weakness, you are talking about its impact, you're reflecting on it, and you're talking about how you're working on improving it in the future, right? So based on this framework, does anyone have a weakness that they think they would like to share in the context of this? You know, not like, oh, I have temper problems because... So something like in the context of a job, does anyone have any weakness that they'd like to share?
One thing that I struggled with was not knowing how to manage a situation when other people are not following policies.
Okay.
Sometimes it can be real sticky.
Okay. So you can say something like, I struggled when other members of my team were showing a little bit of reluctance around following policy. So this was damaging to my relationships with my colleagues because it made them feel like I wasn't an approachable manager, that they couldn't come to me with questions if they made mistakes or whatever. I recognized that this was bad because it was impacting our team's performance. So what I did instead is whenever anybody was not following policy or procedure, I sat down and had a training session with them. You know, something like that. And in the future, I'm going to be continuing to work on this. So that's how you would work that weakness. And you don't want it to be like, again, you don't want to pick a weakness that's going to undermine your ability to do the job, right? Okay. Anybody else? Nope? Everyone here's, oh yeah? Uh-huh.
Focus on the job and task.
Uh-huh.
Forget to celebrate with the other team members when you finish the job.
Right.
Yeah, we are too much focus on the task and future task. Forget the celebrate.
That's a really, really good weakness. So I would say something like, in the past, I've been so focused on my job that I forgot to celebrate our wins as a team. And I realized that this was having an impact on my team because it was hurting morale. It was hurting everyone's good feelings whenever we had a win together. So now what I'm trying to do is anytime we have a win, I at least try to send an email blast to the whole team recognizing, the team members that are responsible. And hopefully I can continue to do that and increase my social participation with my teammates. Something like that, right? Okay, let's move on to what is your biggest strength? What is the biggest project you worked on? Tell me about your most ambitious marketing campaign, and yeah, what is your biggest strength? So those are some of the questions that they can ask. And this is a really great question because they want to give you a chance to show off, actually. And they want to see if the strengths you are mentioning are in line with their hiring needs. Are you mentioning strengths that are going to come in and help them solve their business problems? So bad answers, they don't take enough credit for your work. They say a lot of we, like we. I had this, Felipe, the guy who I showed earlier, the one that I helped him get a $70,000 increase. He did that a lot in his interview answers where he would say, we did this, we did that. One of our biggest strengths as a team was that we blah, blah, blah. And the feedback he would always get in interviews is he sounded like a project manager. And he was actually a very highly technically skilled engineer. And in some fields of engineering, engineers get paid more than the managers. So I was like, why are you saying we? You are the one that did everything. And you would say, I feel guilty, like I want to share credit, this was a team effort, right? But you have to know when to take credit. You can say, I led an initiative and with my teammates we did blah, blah, blah. So you have to take responsibility for what you did. Focusing on a strength that has little to do with the job. So for example, if the job is, I don't know, financial analytics, you can say I'm really good with kids. It's not really a relevant strength. Focusing on a strength that clashes with their values, that's a really good one. So for example, if you are interviewing with a startup and in the job description they mention again and again, they're not mentioning it directly, but they're hinting that they have a small budget. We're looking for someone who is willing to lead from the ground up, someone who can do bootstrapping and blah, blah, blah. They're hinting that they don't have a very big budget for you to work with. If your answer is, I'm really good at leading these large, ambitious projects that have multi-million-dollar budgets, I'm good at reining them in and executing them within budget, that's going to clash with their values because immediately they're going to say, oh, she's too expensive for us. She's going to come in here and she's going to want a big budget to do X, Y, and Z. And we don't need her now. Maybe we'll need her like 5 years from now when we're a little bit bigger, right? So you have to really understand what their values are. And this is critical if you are if you're interviewing for executive roles, right? So your strengths have to align with their values. All right, so what are they looking for in your answer? Do you have the core skills to do the job? Have you used those skills productively? And what is it like to work with you? Are you easy to work with? Okay, and here is a sample answer. Here's my strength. Here's a project where I used my strength. Here's what I did. Here's how it went. And that's why I think that I would be a good fit for your job, right? So for example, let's do one together. Does anyone have a strength they'd like to share that they feel really strongly about, that they think makes a really good interview answer? Uh-huh. I see you tentatively raising your hand. Are you looking at your nails? Are you looking at your manicure? Anyone have any strengths that they'd like to share? Okay, I'll do one. So I think one of my strengths is communication. Like I'm really good at communicating, obviously. So I would say something like, I feel I have very strong communication skills. I really enjoy writing and speaking. I really enjoy sharing and making things simpler for people to understand. For example, I recently had a chance to revamp our sales training documentation and make the sales training more accessible to people with different learning styles. I used an LMS and I did blah, blah, blah. And as a result, we were able to improve our sales staff performance and turnover. And I read in your job description that you're also looking for somebody to help revamp your sales training programs, and that's why I became really interested and applied for this position. Okay, so you're bringing it back full circle. You're not going on and on and on about your strength, and you're not sounding arrogant and pumping yourself up. You're talking about the problems you solved and how you're relating it to what their business needs are. Questions that assess your problem-solving skills. Tell me about a time you overcame an obstacle. Can you tell me about a campaign that you rolled out that wasn't doing well? How did you handle conflicts at your previous job? Tell me about a project that went over budget. So these are questions that they're going to ask that kind of hint to you that these are problems they've had in the past. And whenever I hear a question like this, I get really excited because this is a great chance for me to take some notes and incorporate it when I'm doing my counter offer for a salary negotiation. Right? So for example, if the question they ask is, tell me about a project that was over budget, then I know, oh, okay, these people, they've had projects that have gone over budget in the past. So if I drop in how I am able to rate in projects into the desired budget in 2 or 3 of my answers, then when it's time for me to negotiate my salary, I can say, based on my strengths and my ability to keep projects under budget and make sure everything runs within schedule, I think a 20% increase over the initial offer would be fair. You know what I mean? Does everyone understand that? Does everyone understand how this is great? This is a great question to hear and how it can be tied to when you're negotiating your salary? Yes, thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, let's move on. So they're asking this question because they want to see if you can make the most out of challenging situations, and they're hinting to you about problems. And I put a big arrow there because I was like, this is really important. Take notes if they're ever doing that. Bad answers are those that, say, I've never had that happen. So if, for example, they're like, can you tell me about a time that a project went over budget? And you're like, I have never had that happen. I cannot remember a time when any project went over budget. What you're saying is, I'm inexperienced. I haven't had a broad enough experience for me to be able to handle challenges at your job well. So if that's happening to you, share a time of an example where you came close to that. Right? Share a time of an example where you almost ran over budget, but you were able to renegotiate with vendors or whatever and get it done. Passes the blame onto somebody, or doesn't show a favorable outcome in the end, right? What they're looking for in your answer is, are you level-headed? Are you able to solve problems that they are currently experiencing? And can you grow from tough learning experiences? Do you crack under pressure? So that's what they're looking for. And this answer framework is really simple. It's, here's the challenge that I ran into, here's what I did, here's what happened as a result, and in the future, to prevent such issues, this is what I'm gonna do differently. This is what I've learned from that experience. Sounds good? Okay. All right. Oh, employment gap questions. So these are questions that you're going to run into if you've taken parental leave, if you are new to the country and you were on leave because you're figuring out your visa issues, if you didn't get a job after being laid off. These are very painful questions because it can seem like it's just a really tough situation to go into. So questions like, why is your tenure here less than 2 years? Why have you been out of work? What were you doing in this employment gap? Why are you leaving your current position? They just want to understand, are you unemployable? Are you the kind of person that's going to give me a risk in the future? So that's why they're primarily asking. So are you risky investment? Are your skills up to date? So an unfair thought process that people have is like, especially in fields where it's really fast-paced and fast-moving, they're going to think that you're out of date. So if, for example, you've been on parental leave for 8 months, and you are in a very fast-paced industry like, let's say, fintech or martech, they're going to think, well, in the past 8 months, we've had like ChatGPT take over our entire space. We've had AI completely take over, and I'm concerned that since you've been out of work and you've been busy with your newborn, you're not going to be able to compete at that level that I need you to. And this is unfair and this is discriminatory, but it happens. This is the reality of the world we live in. So what do you do in these situations? Well, here's what not to do. Let's talk about that first. Don't say, hey, I was fired because my boss sucked, and don't pass the blame on to others, and don't show, if you're like, no, I just was unemployed and I didn't do anything, I just took a sabbatical. That's not proactive. You want to show that you kept your skills up to date despite your leave. So let's look at a quick framework for that. Here we are. So you want to complement your job. If they're asking about a question like, why are you leaving your current workplace? Or can you tell me about the reasons of your termination in your last workplace? You always want to start with a compliment. You don't want to make it sound like you left on bad terms. I don't care if your boss was like the worst boss on the planet, if your company had the worst culture ever. Still figure something out that you can compliment. So for example, while I enjoyed my time working for, let's say, SpaceX, I realized it was a time for a new challenge because this industry is moving really quickly and it excites me, right? So I'm
I had a bad experience at the end of the job.
Uh-huh.
It's really complicated and yeah. So it's very difficult to talk about it. And
Okay.
I think it's better to, in an interview situation, to avoid it.
Well, when you avoid something in an interview, like it gives people pause too, because they're like, why are you avoiding? Like, what are you trying to hide? You know what I mean? It can make them pessimistic. And if they're a cynical person, they might look at you less favorably. They might be really kind and they might be like, well, the reality is not every company is going to have a good culture. They might have that gracious way of looking at you, but maybe they won't. So, it's critical to kind of cover your bases. If you leave your company on bad terms, there are a lot of ways you can still talk positively about that. You can talk about the product. You can talk about other teammates. You can talk about vendors you got to work with, clients you got to work with. You can talk about the industry that you were in, right? So there's still a lot of things you can do to show that you enjoyed that experience. There was something there that you liked. So one of the things that I recommend doing is if you have a job in your resume that spans less than 2 years, you give employers this concern that you're a job hopper. What if she comes and joins my company and leaves within a year, you know? Because hiring somebody, it's very costly. And the initial few months that you're at a job, you're not really giving them any return. So when there's turnover, it becomes very expensive for the company. It's in their best interest to retain their employees. So what you want to do is, if you have lots of jobs on your resume that span less than 2 years, is get a recommendation from somebody at that company and stick it in your resume, just one line. So this could be a vendor, a client, a boss, a peer, somebody that you mentored, anybody. Ask them for a recommendation on LinkedIn, copy one line and stick it at the bottom of your resume. That way, in the interview, if they ask you, why did you leave, you know, after only a year, you can be like, I left after I finished all of the projects that I was assigned. I left on good terms. I built a lot of really strong relationships there, as you can see from my resume. Like, you're assuaging that concern before it even comes up. Does that make sense? And one of the really nice things you can do is, if you are, say, you're trying to pivot your career, or you're trying to get a promotion, or you're trying to change from one department to another, getting a recommendation from the person who you would be, like, say for example, I'm in sales, and then I want to go into marketing. If I can get a recommendation from somebody in the marketing team complimenting my ability to create marketing collateral and stick that in the resume, then it shows that I've done those marketing duties. You know what I mean? So that it gives that social proof, and it makes that interview go much more smoothly. So there's a lot of preparation and homework that you can do before an interview in the form of putting your resume together in a strategic manner that helps mitigate some of these nitpicky defensive questions, right? And if you have one of those concerns where people keep asking you in an interview about some specific point that is like a perceived weakness in your profile, please let me know. I'm gonna help you figure it out. I mean, I've been doing this for 13 years. I have literally seen the craziest stories. I can't even tell you, like, there was one woman who was like literally suing her employer, and she worked in such a tiny industry that everyone knew about it, and I still helped her, talk about that on her resume. I still helped her talk about that in her interview. So there's a solution for everything. No matter what you're going through, there is an answer. So just reach out to me and I'd be happy to help you with that. Let's skip this one because I kind of covered this, and you can access that on my resume cheat sheet as well. All right, questions that assess your overall fit. Why should we hire you? Why should we prefer you over other candidates? Why are you interested in working here? You've been working so long as a salesperson. Why are you interested in transitioning to marketing now, right? So these are questions that are designed to see if you're a safe investment. It encourages candidates to share their, so this is a chance for you to show off. It helps them pick the best candidate for the role. And again, you don't want to focus on a strength that doesn't have anything to do with the job. So here is a sample answer. So here's a sample answer. It's kind of similar to tell me about your biggest strengths, so why should we hire you for the job? So that's why when you're doing your research before an interview, you should pick like 5 strengths that match really strongly with whatever are in the job description. You guys come in, please take a seat. So pick strengths that relate strongly to what are in the job description, because you'll have a chance to have multiple answers that talk about different strengths, right? Ideally 3 to 5 would be good, so that you can remember them on one hand. You can mention each of your different strengths for different questions, so it doesn't seem like you're a one-trick pony, right? And that's it. That's the end of the presentation. Please check out my website over there. You can I have so many blogs on interview questions, like literally every interview question you can think of. I promise you, I probably have a blog on it. I'll let everyone take a picture of this or scan it, and I'll show you how to navigate to that. You can simply go to my website and then go to blog, and on the side here you'll see 19 blogs on interviews. So you can use that, you can use the search function. I talk a lot about perceived weaknesses that people have, like employment gaps, entrepreneurial experience, if you're changing careers and all of that. I talk about different things that you can do to assuage those concerns in interview opportunities. Does anyone have any questions?
Do you have any advice for like new graduates from college?
Yeah, so what kinds of jobs are you interested in?
I'm a public health major.
Okay.
So I'm just looking into, I come on with different fields, so I'm just looking at everything.
Okay, so what's going to happen if you're looking at everything is you're not going to have that focus that you need in order to make a really strong impression. What you want is messaging that's really tight and focused. So in a lot of the bad answers that I was showing you, one of the weaknesses was they're not really on topic, like they talk about things that are outside that field. So you don't want to make that mistake. If you can focus your job search on one area, you'll find that you're a lot better prepared for interviews, and your resume is going to be a lot stronger too. You're going to get more calls for interviews. It's going to sound like, hey, if I'm narrowing the scope of my job search, I'm going to have fewer interviews and fewer opportunities. Actually, the exact opposite is true, because your LinkedIn profile, your resume, all of your messaging is going to be a lot stronger, so you're going to have a much higher interview rate, and you're going to be going on a lot more interviews.
Well, in every application that I submit through LinkedIn or Indeed, with the different jobs that I could apply to, I usually do get interviews.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a first interview, second interview, but they also want that experience that we environmentalists don't get.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see your question. Okay, so if it feels like you don't have the required experience, there are many ways that you can build that up. You can talk on your resume about projects that you did in school that relate to whatever, even if it's like a homework assignment. You can say, let's say public health, let's say you did like an epidemiology study and you're interviewing to be like an epidemiologist assistant. They can say, we're looking for somebody with more experience. You can say, I have a lot of experience doing epidemiology research in school. I did XYZ project. We studied the spread of coronavirus and all of that. So relating it, because they're not, when someone says you don't have experience, that's not what they really mean. What they really mean is, I don't think you have the required skills to do this job well. I think you're going to be a risk. So you have to manage that concern. You have to prove that you have that skill. And it can come in the form of schoolwork. It can come in the form of like any volunteer work that you've done, any internships. One of my clients, what she did is she was trying to get a PhD in philosophy, and she had a background in finance. That has like nothing to do with philosophy, right? So she would go and write research papers on her own. Like she would just watch YouTube videos on philosophy and try to understand and juxtapose her understanding against it and write research papers. And she put out a little blog, and that way she was at least able to have a conversation and show some experience in the field of philosophy. So, building that experience, it can... Okay, this is something I feel really strongly about, because I feel like if you have privilege, you can afford to do that. But if you don't have that privilege of taking that time, if let's say you have a job and you have to do some fundamental type job in order to put food on the table, like you don't have time to do these things. Figure out whatever you do have time for. Maybe it's just doing a little bit of research and publishing your findings on Facebook, or maybe it's volunteering with an organization. Like if you have children, maybe you can involve your children in that, and all of that. So figure out what it's going to take for you to build that experience, but maybe you don't even have to do that. Maybe you just go through your school projects and you go through your transcript, try to remember the classes you took, and try to remember, like, what did we do in that class? Make a list of it, and try to relate that as much as possible to your target job. Talk about that on your resume as well, so they don't have that question coming in. You know what I mean? They're not putting you in that defensive position. Does anyone else have any questions? Uh-huh.
So, I'm sorry,
No problem.
I have a lot of internship experience from my college career. I have like about 4 with different companies.
Okay.
But it's like 3 months, 4 months, 5 months worth of internship experience. And do like managers or recruiters like seeing those, or?
Yeah, absolutely. An internship shows that you have the ability to navigate like a corporation's culture. It's absolutely, you should put those on your resume. And if anybody wants free feedback on your resume, just go to my website, careertutors.com, and upload your resume here, and we can go through it on call. Okay? Or if anyone has their resume on their phone, I'd be happy to take a look at it. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, I think, wow, 7:01. I think I deserve a pat on the back or at least a cookie, right? All right, you guys, have a good evening, have a good dinner. I'll be around if anyone has any questions. Big shout out to Ali for helping organize this. Thank you so much, Ali. I'll be writing you a letter of recommendation on LinkedIn.